So today we're up in Ethan's treehouse. This is the legendary bicycle elevator treehouse, and he's actually pedaling up here right now. You can probably hear it. The camera's probably shaking a little bit. It's just great. So I'm up here every single day making videos with Ethan for Grindhar's YouTube channel. And I know surprisingly little about its inception and how he actually built it. I know that he built it basically entirely by himself, so we're going to get into the creative process, the building process, and basically a bit of everything. And we'll probably talk about the 360 treehouse too, because why not?
Yeah, and we'll get into the elevator process that, as you can tell, it's kind of a workout.
Yeah. So what inspires, you're 22, you're fresh out of school.
Yep.
Thinking about this idea is pretty sweet, but like the drive and encouragement to actually go through and do it by yourself, like where did that come from?
Well, yeah, so like you said, I was just out of college. I didn't really know where I was going to go next, what I was going to do. I was just working construction up here during the summer, and I'd always had a dream of building a treehouse. Like, I did actually build a tiny little platform of a treehouse when I was like 12. But like, as a teenager, about the age you start thinking it'd be nice to have your own place, but can't afford one. I'd thought like, oh, maybe I'll just like build a little house up in a tree, and then even then, geez, I'm still catching my breath from riding the bike. You'd think I'd be in better shape for this. Anyway, so what was I? Yeah, so I thought about it before building like an actual treehouse with walls and insulation and stuff. Mm-hmm. I'd even drawn up some ideas when I was like 17 or something. And then I'm really not sure what like inspired the thought that day, but it was just one day after I got done working construction. I was just out splitting firewood, and I was like, I now have like the skills and I have the time to build a treehouse, and not only that, but I also have the tools to do it cheaply. I had access to a sawmill that I could use, and tons of acres of trees. So I basically just was like, well, if I have all of those things, most people have none of those things and want a treehouse. Mm-hmm. I was like, I have all of the things that I need. I can't not do it.
Yeah.
Like, I just saw it as like I couldn't not try, because I had the opportunity, I had the time. So so that day I just started like drawing up more ideas and coming up with plans, and I even prototyped the clamping mechanism that clamps it onto the tree and stuff. Came up with all of that the first day, and then just kind of started building it. And
was the bicycle part of it, or did that come later?
No, yeah, that was later.
Okay, so you were already dead set on building a tree house that you could sleep in. Yeah. Before any kind of bicycle elevator thought. Well,
I wasn't certain whether I'd actually get to the point of building walls and like making it a whole tree house. I was just like, I had friends come hang out, have bonfires or whatever. I was like, oh, it'd just be sweet to have a place to hang out. I was like, I always had the idea of doing walls, but I wasn't sure if I'd actually have the time or motivation to follow through with it. But yeah, that was all before I came up with the bicycle. The bicycle was after having climbed a ladder 30 feet 28,000 times to build the treehouse. I was like, this sucks.
So when you say you started that day, like you decided to do it and then you started milling wood that day? Like
I don't think I started milling wood. I started drawing it up and coming up with the plans for it, though.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I did start building the cable clamp system for it.
Okay.
That same day that I decided to do it.
And is that something that you were Googling and learning about, or that you invented because you didn't want to bolt into the tree to keep it healthier?
Yeah, so I also decided, because I was like, fresh out of college and full of myself, that I was going to do no research whatsoever to build it. I was like, I want to come up with something entirely on my own. Like, I don't want outside influences on my design or my idea. Like, obviously there's always outside influences, but I didn't want to like Google how other people built tree houses. So yeah. And for a few reasons, I didn't want to put bolts into the tree, because obviously in theory it's better to not do that for the life of the tree. But also just it's a challenge to myself. I was initially thinking that one of the problems with building a treehouse around a tree is that the tree grows. And so initially my plan was to design something that could be expanded as the tree grows. And that's why I was thinking about not bolting it hard in. And that didn't end up working out or making sense at all. But I did follow through with the idea of not having bolts into the tree. So I just basically a very large clamp that wraps around parts of the treehouse and smashes it onto the tree and just holds it in place with friction, basically.
Is that desire to figure it out yourself always been with you? Because I noticed when we're in the garage sometimes too, like you'd rather spend like an hour fiddling with an engine piece, figuring out how it works and then fix it than like go and Google it and then do what you Googled. Like, is that something you've always had, or is that something that you've developed after like building things over and over again?
I mean, I think it's a bit of both, but it's definitely always been there. Like, I just always liked figuring out how things work. Like, I used to just take apart appliances and stuff, and whatever I could get my hands on as a kid. I'd just take it apart and be like, what's this piece do? So I've always had a bit of that. And then I think it's also been reinforced by growing up out here, like in the middle of nowhere, and not being able to just drive or walk or bike to the store to get stuff. So like a lot of it just comes from not having immediate access to things, and you know, as a kid not having internet or a smartphone or any of that stuff. Like you just have to figure it out. So like that's how I grew up, and then now that's just how I do things even still.
Cool. That's awesome.
I mean,
so with the step-by-step of the treehouse, you designed the clamping mechanism, and then you probably built this pad that we're sitting on right now first. Basically. So like I said, I built a prototype of the clamp, but I actually just made a miniature one with a small piece of cable and clamped it around a tree, and then just like jumped like down at ground level and just jumped up and down on it to see if it was going to work. That was all the first day's work was that, and I was like, cool, this will work. Or I think it will anyway. And so how did it work? It was just...
So it's just a piece of cable with a bolt welded onto the end of it, so you can tighten it, so it just becomes like a big strap with a bolt to tighten it down, and then that just goes through the structural members of the treehouse and just cinches it around the tree like a hose clamp on a hose. makes
sense to me. So you tested it on the ground, and then what? So then I said, I started drawing up ideas for the shape. Once I decided on a hexagon, because that made the most sense, wrapping it around a tree. Then I built the 6 main trusses that hold up the floor. So the whole thing's actually made out of cedar, all the structural members, everything, because it is more rot resistant. And it's also lightweight but decently strong. So I built those 6 trusses. They're just a very basic truss, just a triangle that has an upright member against the tree that gets clamped on, the diagonal support, and then the flat piece on top that's what we're sitting on right now. So I built those 6 pieces, and then I set up the ladder up this tree. And so the treehouse actually started out a bit higher than it is currently. Because of the friction system, it slid down in the process of building it, and then the wind blowing, the tree flexing. Anyway, so it was like at the very top of the tallest ladder I had. And that's how you decided how tall to make it?
Exactly. That was it. I was just like, well, this is as high as I can go.
Nice.
So I climbed up the ladder with a ratchet strap and just strapped it around the tree with a few carabiners on it. And then I just carried those trusses up the ladder one at a time and clipped them into the carabiners. So they're just hanging there. And then I got them sort of vaguely situated, and then just used ratchet straps around those 6 pieces around the tree just to kind of get them roughly where they needed to go, and then clamped on the 3 giant, it's like a 1-inch diameter cable from like an old logging winch that I just found in the woods. I have a habit of building with whatever's on hand. So so I just, I got it in place with ratchet straps, and then I got the clamps on there, got them tightened down, and then just use some random scraps to space them out evenly, get them all measured in equal distances and at the right angles and all of that. Got them all spaced out, and then started building the skeleton of it in between that, all the braces that hold it together and hold up the floor. And then obviously from there it was pretty straightforward, just one board at a time on the floor and all of that. But
that whole process you just explained, you did by yourself.
Yep.
So you just hiked up the ladder with each truss, flipped it into a carabiner, ratchet strapped it, spaced them apart perfectly, all on your lonesome.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, no,
that's hard. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it was a ton of work.
At any point were you just like, oh shoot, I'm in like over my head, or were you always like, this is awesome, we're gonna do it?
Yeah, I was pretty much always just like stoked about it.
Yeah.
You know, there were days where I didn't have time to work on it, but like I was never like, oh, this isn't gonna work. You know, just kind of put it together.
Yeah. Well, after you got that far, what'd you do next?
Obviously, I just laid out, the floorboards and all of that. And so then, once it was just a floor, that was pretty cool because you could hang out up here already.
And you had a place to work too.
Yeah, exactly. I could actually bring a saw up here and cut boards here and stuff. But I mean, if you just what you can see here, like all of these boards. Well, not all of them. Some of them came up in sections, but like basically every single one I carried up the ladder. One board at a time.
Yeah, I guess there's no other way to do it. You don't have like a forklift or...
No, I mean, I could have set up a pulley system to hoist stuff up, but then you still can only do so many boards at a time, and you still have to go up and down the ladder, so I basically just carried them all. But, but yeah, so once I had the floor on, I built some temporary railings around it and had a few parties up here with friends. I mean, when I say parties, it was just like 4 people hanging out in a treehouse playing card games or whatever.
Cool.
But, yeah, and then... somewhere at around that point, after climbing the ladder however many thousand times, is when the inspiration for the elevator came in. And I didn't have a very solid plan for it. I just knew that I needed some sort of elevator that was human powered, so I didn't have to climb a ladder every day. Because I was like, it would just suck to actually be using it as a bedroom, like sleeping up here. I was like, there's no way I'm going to want to climb a ladder every night to go to bed.
Yeah.
So I had to come up with something better. And I started talking about it with my friend Asa. And we were just at the very basic stages of like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to build an elevator with pulleys and cranks and whatever? And I was talking about like maybe, something you sit on and then have a hand crank or like whatever. And he was like, well, legs are way stronger than arms. You should do pedals. I was like, that's a great idea. And then he was just joking because I was into unicycling at the time. He was like, oh, you should make it out of a unicycle. And I was like, that'd be hilarious. But a bicycle could actually work. Yeah. So he and I sat down and kind of talked out the ideas and sketched some stuff up and came up with the basic idea for the bicycle elevator. And then, but before I could implement it, I had to build a roof so that it would have something to hang from. Yeah. And unlike your average house, this roof doesn't sit on the walls. It's supported by the tree separately from the floor.
That makes sense. You don't want to put all that weight just on the bottom trusses.
Right. Yeah, and also my other thought was this is a fairly thin tree. It's plenty strong to hold all this weight, but it moves quite a bit in the wind, which we get here in the summer.
Yeah, I've slept up here during a windstorm when we first started the channel. I was like, ooh, I have some weird dreams.
Fun fact, you slept up here for what, like a few months when we started the channel. You were living in the treehouse.
Yep. Yeah, we're just all in. Yeah. We're just quit our jobs and started the channel. And I was like, this is a great place to live. Great views, really peaceful. It always smells like fresh tree.
Yeah, so fast forward to when it's done. Isn't it like, it never gets old waking up in a treehouse.
No.
It gets old going up there at night when you're tired. When you wake up, you're never not like, oh man, this is freaking cool. I'm in a treehouse.
Yeah, my first time like waking up and having to use the bathroom, I was like, shoot.
That part does get old, yeah.
Number 1's easy enough, but if you got a number 2, it's like, all right, well, we got to figure something out here. We got to go all the way down the bike, go to the house. Yeah, but yeah, that's a fun part of it. So the roof is separate from the rest of it.
Yeah, so the roof's basically just an upside down version of the floor. It's not quite as tall because it doesn't need to be. Yeah. But 6 trusses clamped onto the tree, then assemble the rest. Same basic procedure. And so I built that, and then there was no walls at all. It was just a basic railing around it and the roof. And then once I had the roof, I had something to hang the bicycle elevator system from, so I started building that. And again, it was just built out of whatever the heck I had laying around. I bought some cable because I didn't have any of that. Other than that, cable and pulleys, I don't think I bought anything for it. Just
And did your initial idea of how it could work, or did you have like one that didn't work so well and improved on it?
Yeah, it was more the second. Like, I never had to like start from scratch, but it went through various versions to become fully functional. The first version basically worked. I just had to tweak it. You know, like the main thing was just gearing. It was a mountain bike, which actually was my mom's old bike. Mm-hmm. I just stole my mom's old bicycle and chopped it up. And, I mean, she wasn't using it anymore. It was pretty old, but but the lowest gear in it was still pretty fast. Like, it seems really slow when you're pedaling on the ground, but when you're going straight up in the air, it was just way too high of gearing to be able to do it. So that was one thing I had to modify right away to get it to work at all, was to just change the gearing drastically. So on your average mountain bike, there's the front chain rings that are huge, and the rears are tiny. So I cut one of the big ones off the front and welded it onto the rear, so the gear was just way lower. So that was one of the major modifications, and then aside from that, just making a heavier counterweight. So it's not just the force of you pedaling, there's also a big weight on the other side of the treehouse with two pulleys, or two cables going to it, one to the front and one to the back of the bicycle, so that it's stable. And then that helps you lift it. It's a variable amount of weight. It's a water tank that you fill up with water to account for however heavy the rider is. But anyway, so it's probably like 80 to 100 pounds of counterweight. So pedaling up is actually relatively easy. So that was, once I figured out those two things, it basically worked. And then I did do some upgrades later to make it nicer and better, but just, you know, it did kind of fundamentally work at that point.
Did you ever have any catastrophic failures figuring it out?
I don't think so.
Everybody gets stuck halfway up?
Yeah, people get stuck halfway up all the time, but rarely me. Because, like, I built it and I know how it works. Yeah. So I know what to do and what not to do, but it's not like a idiot-proof thing. Like, most people that try it for the first time have a pretty hard time with it because it's just not normal for riding a bike, and so a lot of people get stuck halfway, but then I'm there watching. I can set up a ladder and help them out or whatever. But
and you can always let yourself down.
And that's the thing about when you get stuck. If you do it wrong, the cable gets twisted up in the rear wheel, and then you can't go up or down.
Yeah, that's not ideal. But then going down, you just use the brake. That's my favorite part.
Yeah. Oh yeah, going down's the best. You store all your kinetic energy all night, and then just sit on it and get a free ride down. So that's definitely the best part. Yeah, and you just use the rear brake to slow it down because the cable just wraps around it. If you want like a detailed description of the bicycle elevator, we have a video of that on the main channel. But yeah. Anyway, and then once I built that, like right after it was finished, or even halfway finished, the elevator thing, my friend Steven, our friend Steven, came up one weekend, and we were just having fun with it, and we decided to film just like a short little video of it working, just so we could show people, and then put that on my old YouTube channel, and chaos ensued. The world found out.
Yeah, so that was way before we've even thought about Grind Hard.
Yep.
And so what was that like, just like building this treehouse in your backyard just for you, and then having the whole world see it like instantly?
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. Yeah, because it wasn't even done. Like the walls weren't built. It wasn't even close to done when the video went viral on YouTube. And like I had a channel and posted stuff randomly, but it was just like videos of me unicycling or slacklining or just whatever the heck I felt like doing. And so I wasn't expecting anything out of it when I posted that video, and then it just blew up. And not just on YouTube. Like YouTube was a small part of it, but because of that, it was all over the internet, all like news sources, like, and it was crazy because it was just
in magazines, like, TV shows. It was in a TV show in Japan, right?
TV show in Japan. I think a radio show in Germany. I don't know if that one ever aired, but they interviewed me for it. But yeah, like all over the world, like a kids magazine in Turkey, like blogs. I mean, you couldn't even count the blogs because they didn't generally ask for permission. They just found information and wrote their own version of it. But, the funny thing is, the first like news source that got it was just some random CNN thing, just a talk show, and they didn't like call me or send me an email or anything. They just like took the video and started talking about it, which, like, not that they can't do that, but like they had no information, so it wasn't all that accurate. They didn't even bother to ask like how to pronounce my name, so they're just like talking about it, like not really knowing what, like, oh, look at this thing.
Yeah.
But Anyway, but yeah, it was crazy because I was just like, well, I just built this for me, and now everyone thinks it's awesome, and that led to all sorts of other things. But yeah, it was a pretty crazy experience. It was also just cool because like I always wanted to like invent stuff as a kid, and I was like, wow, like I actually invented something that like people care about and didn't exist before. Like nobody else had built a bicycle elevator, and but yeah, so that was crazy.
That's awesome. And then after that, so many people heard about it, you like almost turned it into a business for a little bit, huh?
Yeah, so which I never really wanted. I didn't want to be a treehouse builder, but it was fun for a couple of years, off and on. So the first one, I just ended up building one for a neighbor up the road. He had a vacation home here and wanted a treehouse for his kids. So that was just kind of a smaller, simpler version of this, just for kids to hang out in, just not very far off the ground. So that one was fairly simple, and then the other one, kind of through an accidental circumstance, I ended up building a really fancy one on the lake in town, and Asa helped build that one because it was a way bigger project. That one was, I think, with the porch and everything, it was like 300 square feet, which is tiny for a house, but freaking huge for a treehouse.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, and that one turned out really awesome. That was a really fun project, working on it with Asa and stuff. So people were always like, oh, you should turn this into a career and build tree houses around the country. And like, I kind of thought about it, but ultimately it wasn't really the direction I wanted to go in life. But it was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. And so then after that, the TV show started.
Yeah.
And you guys had to think of something bigger and better to build for that one.
Right. Yeah. So the premise that they wanted for the TV show was that like I lived in this treehouse, out in the middle of nowhere. I'd given up on society and built a treehouse because that's obviously the practical option for survival. Mm-hmm. And the premise was that Asa was going to come out here and do the same thing, build a treehouse and live in the woods, and we were going to, I don't know, be survivalists out here in tree houses together. But so they wanted us to build a new tree house for the sake of the show, during the course of the season, and film it, which was made drastically more difficult by the fact that we could never use power tools on camera. So that was dumb.
Really?
Yeah, because we're survivalists. We don't have power tools.
Well, you got a generator.
Yeah, we did borrow one for one episode because we had to have a welder, and they were like, well, we got to explain this somehow, so we borrowed a generator and welder.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, so that treehouse, having had 3 other tree houses that I designed and built, I had a lot more. Well, both Asa and I had a lot more experience in like design ideas, so we kind of put all of that into the new one and made it like as cool and awesome as possible and as easy to build, because we knew it was going to be a time crunch and stupid on the TV show, so we designed it to be as easy to assemble as possible. And also we designed it with the idea in mind that like you could actually live in it, like it'd be big enough to. It was never finished after the show. I mean, it's complete, but it's not like finished inside. But the idea was to make it big enough that you could like have a kitchen and stuff in there if you really, if somebody wanted to. There was a moment when we started doing the Asa was kind of like, maybe I'll actually live in this treehouse. Obviously he didn't, but so to accomplish that, we thought that 2-story would be not only awesome, but like the easiest way to gain extra square footage in a treehouse rather than making it really big in diameter. Just add a second floor.
Yeah, much easier to balance that weight and.
Yeah, and to just like in a forest where there's other trees, to not have to cut down a whole bunch of trees to build this giant wide treehouse, and just easier to support, easier to make it strong, and all of those things. So, yeah, and then the other challenge, once we decided to do it 2 stories, is that again it was in a fairly small, flexible tree, plenty strong, but bends around a lot, and when from the bottom of the floor to the top of the roof was like almost 20 feet. And so, actually, I think it was 20 feet. or is 20 feet. So the tree bends a lot in that amount of space. And so we had to come up with a system and a design that would allow the tree to bend and wouldn't restrict it, because if it restricted all the bending in that portion, first of all, it would put a huge amount of stress on the treehouse.
Yeah.
And also it would make the tree weaker, because now instead of bending throughout the whole length of it, it's only going to bend at the top and might just go.
Yeah.
Which would obviously be bad.
And you lose your house.
Yeah. I used to have bad dreams about that when I slept up in the treehouse.
Really?
I'd have all the time. I'd have dreams about it, like being on the ground when I woke up, or like sliding down the tree overnight, or like the top of the tree breaking off. Like I just had so many dreams about that. Probably from like sleeping with the noises of it going in the wind.
Mm-hmm. That's the inevitable thing about tree houses. They're not going to last forever.
Yep. Yeah, and like side point, that's. I thought about that a lot as I was building it, and like having just gotten out of college and art classes and stuff like that, I was like, oh yeah, well that's like part of the art of it, is that it's not permanent. Like it'll only last so long, and that'll be really cool. It's just like it's just part of the experience is that it's temporary. Like anyway, I don't need to go into all the reasons, but like that was kind of part of my thought process of building it, and also the entire reason why I never wanted to build them for other people. Because it's one thing when you do it for yourself and you are fully aware of that, and you're spending your own time and money. It's totally different when somebody pays you 5, 10, 20, 30 grand to build a fancy tree house. Yeah. And then the tree dies the next year. It's like you can do everything in your power to build the tree house right, and the tree could just give up. Like it's not overly harmful to trees to put tree houses in them. Despite the trees not really being impacted, like trees just die all the time or blow over in windstorms. Yeah. Like, and I just didn't really want to deal with that as a business. Like obviously everybody knows that, but knowing it on paper and then having it happen to you is two totally different things. And like, I just didn't want to deal with like people being like, you built my tree house and it just collapsed. I'm like, well, yeah, the tree died. Sorry, trees die. But anyway, yeah. So
you're trying to figure out a way for the treehouse to be able to flex on the two-story treehouse.
Yeah. So we were designing this, the attachment system out of metal. Obviously, that makes more sense. And so after building this one, the friction system kind of worked. But again, in the bendy tree, over time, it would just kind of shimmy down the tree. Like we're talking millimeters a day at most. But it did move down like a couple feet from where I originally had the treehouse, and then I put a couple of big screws in it just to stop that motion, because it didn't take much, just a little bit to anchor it. But so I kind of like tried other ideas, and the one we built in town for other people, we knew that we didn't want to have that risk because it already wasn't very high off the tree or off the ground, and we just didn't want somebody's fancy treehouse sliding down the tree. So that one was bolted in. That was kind of a combination of bolt and clamp style, but I won't get into that. But so by the time we came to the fourth treehouse, the two-story one we built for the show, we'd come up with some better ideas, and so we like miniaturized the clamping system and made it actually adjustable so that you could, in theory, adjust it out as the tree grows, which doesn't really work in practice because you have to maintain that pressure. But it's also like, instead of being the whole height of the bottom of the treehouse, which this one's like 6 feet of tree that's clamped onto, this was just like 2 feet, and it's just 3 metal clamps on the tree, so it's way smaller, not all the way around obviously because that would girdle it, but 3 vertical friction devices on the tree. So anyway, we designed that with the giant steel ring around it, and then the idea to allow the treehouse to move was to have the hole in the floor at the bottom be extra big, which you'd want for growth anyway, and then make the attachment point at the very top of the roof. So that treehouse is also upside down and backwards structurally, so it hangs from the roof. The top of the roof is the only point attached to the tree. And so the idea was that point, we would make it so that it wasn't totally fixed, and it could, like a ball joint, could just kind of rock back and forth as the tree moved. And then we were drawing it out on paper and coming up with different ideas of how we could do that. And then I was like just looking at the designs, and I was like, wait a minute. There's literally nothing to stop us from making this treehouse rotate.
You just thought, we're hanging from the top, and it's going to be able to move. Yeah. So why not?
Yeah, exactly. And what was really funny is, so we were already like building this for the TV show. Like we already had contracts, and they were going to be here in a month or whatever. And so we were in the shop, like cutting metal and putting it together and stuff. And we didn't tell anyone in the show that it was going to rotate until they were here. And we already built the whole system. Because we built the whole attachment system ahead of time, not on camera, because first of all, it was going to be using a lot of tools that they couldn't show. And second of all, we just had to for time frame, because it took us, I don't know, a week or something to build the whole attachment system, or maybe more, I don't remember. But, it would have been time we didn't have when we were filming to do that.
Yeah.
And to do it right. So yeah, we built the whole thing, and then they got here and we were like showing it to them, and they're like, yeah, so this is how this works, and this is how this works, and like this part attaches to the tree, and then this part holds the tree house, and then I went, and then it does this, and just went and spun it, because we just had it like clamped onto a post in the yard.
Oh yeah.
To show it off. And so I just was like, and then it does this, and it just spun it around, and they were like, what?
That's awesome.
So we did that partly just because it'd be funny to like reveal it like that, and then also just because we didn't want to give them the opportunity to say no.
Yeah.
If it's already done, they can't say no.
Yep.
They might be like, no, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Too bad. We're building a rotating treehouse.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was fun.
So how does that system work? You got the steering wheel there.
Yeah. So that was the last part of the treehouse that we actually built, was the mechanism to make it rotate. Like the system to allow it to rotate was there from the beginning. But the system to make it rotate, we added in basically after the show was almost done, or they had left. They were filming other things, and then they came back. But anyway, yeah, so there's a steering wheel on the porch. You spin that. It's got a Subaru differential there. Well, the ring and pinion gear out of a Subaru differential. I build a lot of things that are not cars out of Subaru parts.
You got a yard full of Subaru parts.
There's Subaru parts in the bicycle elevator. There's, on everything. Anyway, so you spin the steering wheel. It turns a ring and pinion. So steering wheel's upright, turns the pinion gear, spins, and then the ring gear is laying flat underneath it. So it spins the ring gear, which has a shaft welded into it that goes straight up through the bottom floor, or through the second floor, and then up to the level of the basically the bottom of the roof. And then we went through a few different versions to make it work, but that shaft then has this very small sprocket on it on one end, and then on the other end, or then there's a big chain, like motorcycle chain basically, that goes across to the center, or right next to the tree. With a very big sprocket, like a 50-tooth sprocket on that end. And then that has another shaft going straight up to the top of the roof where the attachment system is. And then that's got another small sprocket for gear reduction. And then the chain wraps all the way around the tree and goes around the hexagon, like steel frame that holds it all up is like this big around. And so the chain goes from a 10-tooth sprocket on the drive shaft all the way around the tree, so it's probably like a 200-tooth sprocket or something. So
wow,
huge.
Where'd you find that thing?
Well, it's not actually. It's a like a 50-tooth dirt bike sprocket cut into 6 pieces. So it's just like a section of teeth on each corner.
Okay.
Which is all you need. You don't need it to go all the way around for that, because it doesn't spin at any speed. It spins at 1 revolution per 10 minutes,
Yeah,
like.
I would still love to put an electric motor on that thing and then do a time lapse of it just going all the way in circles all night with lights on inside, going through the windows. Yeah. This winter we should do that.
Just hook up a couple of drill batteries to a little motor and just give it an extra gear reduction, because like it's already hundreds to 1 reduction. So it would be pretty easy to add another, drill with another gear to give it a massive reduction more, and then it would turn like 1 RPH, revolution per hour,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. But anyway, so that's the basic system. Obviously, it's, not super complicated, but not something most people would think of doing.
Yeah. I just imagine, I know you'd never sell this place, but what the realtor would come up for in the paragraph underneath the photos, people would be reading it and be like, what the heck? It's like this little house, totally custom, cool.
Yep. But like
with
700
treehouse with a bicycle elevator plus 360 2-story treehouse with panoramic views, like literal panoramic views. Like, it'd be the most hilarious real estate listing ever.
It'd be really funny too, because the realtor would try to tack on all this value when in reality, like, these have no value to most people, like dollar value. They're awesome, but like they don't count as like they're gonna fall down eventually.
Yeah. The only thing I could see if someone wanted to buy it for like Airbnb, but he'd be taking on quite a liability.
Yeah, and there's a reason I haven't done that. Like people have, like dozens and dozens of people are like, oh, you should do an Airbnb, rent it out. I'm like, no. First of all, that's a lot of work for not a lot of money for something like this. It's one bed.
Yeah.
It's a bed. It's not a bedroom. It's just a bed in a tree with no amenities. You can't charge that much for it, especially 20 miles from town.
Yeah.
And then on top of all of that, you have the liability if somebody comes up here, gets drunk, falls out, and breaks their neck.
Yeah.
Like, yes, there's insurance for that, but that doesn't change the fact that somebody just broke their neck on your treehouse.
Yeah.
They'll find a way to sue you.
Yeah.
And so I never did that.
Yeah, and maintenance and all that stuff would just be crazy for this kind of thing. And
changing the sheets and all the normal stuff of an Airbnb, plus it's
way harder. Yeah.
Exactly. And then it also would just be like weeks of labor to make it more idiot proof. Like right now, you either ride a bicycle elevator that like everyone fails at the first time.
Yeah.
Or you climb a rope ladder and then cross a couple of bridges just holding onto a rope. Like, it's not user-friendly.
There's been plenty of times I've been up here and someone new comes over and they think they can and they're halfway up the ladder, the bike, and they're like, nope. The second they see the ground from like 12 feet, it's just over.
Airbnb. Yeah. I want a refund. I can't sleep. Too bad. You can pay for
there's nothing you can do.
You can set up a tent in the yard.
And if you tried to make it safer, it would ruin the aesthetic too.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, right now it looks so cool, and it is like pretty dang safe, but also kind of sketchy depending on where your comfort level is.
It's all about where you draw the line.
It's definitely not idiot proof.
No, not at all idiot proof. Yeah. Yeah. People freak out about it all the time, but like that's part of like what I was talking about earlier with the art of it. Like that's part of the, that's part of the aesthetic and the art of this treehouse. Is it's like. It's something you do as a kid. You don't think about safety. Well, most kids don't. I mean, there are some. Most kids aren't like, oh, I could fall out of this tree and die. They're like, I'm gonna build a tree fort and I'm gonna be like a freaking pirate captain or something. Like, you don't think about safety. So like, if you put all these rails and guards and made it safe, like then it would totally ruin the aesthetic.
This keeps you young.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think you're gonna do next? Is there any next?
In terms of tree houses?
Well, just like on the property, Like, I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff. You got a rally track. Yeah. You got, I mean, obviously the Barbie Jeeps and everything.
We've got all that,
But like, what are you gonna do? Anything else? Like once you finish your house, or I know you got some new zip lines in. Like, but like, is there any other kind of ideas you had that be like, that would actually be pretty sweet?
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously, I want to build a new shop eventually, but that's a big, expensive project, and I'm not going to start that in the fall right before it snows. So finish my house, that's the main one, and then build a shop eventually. I have other ideas for really cool tree houses. I just don't have a reason for them. Like if I ever have kids and they get to be like teenagers and want their own space, or like however old they are when they want that, I'll be like, okay, well, we'll build you a tree house.
What's the idea? Are you willing to give it away on the podcast?
No, it's nothing like proprietary or unique. It's just like everything I've learned from all the tree houses I've built is that the most important factor of a tree house for practicality to live in it is to be able to walk into it without climbing anything. The bicycle elevator is cool and it's a novelty and it's awesome, but it's not practical and it's annoying.
So you'd make it lower with like a bridge to it kind of a thing?
So the one we built in town was like that. It's on a steep slope right next to the lake. And so you walk into it from yard level from their house. And it's only like maybe 20 feet from yard to center of tree. Less than that to the edge of the tree house. But by the time you get to the far side of the porch, because there's like a half wraparound porch and then you walk in the door. So by the time you're at the far side, it's like solidly 15 plus feet off the ground because it's just a steep slope. And so that you have the same feeling of treehouse, but not being a pain to get into.
So at that point, you're much more likely to go hang out in there with friends, come over and
like, hey, let's go spend a night in the treehouse for fun.
Yeah,
like you're just more likely to use it, or or as an Airbnb or a guest house or whatever. So anyway, the idea I have is just it's more of a location than a design really, but it would be down kind of over the pond, like where the new zip lines go. There's a spot over the little stream the seasonal stream that runs through the pond. Where there's 3 big trees and kind of roughly a triangle right around that. But it's like a really steep ravine, so you could build the treehouse at the level of the bank at the top, and it would be like 18, 20 feet above the creek bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could have a glass floor for part of it, so you could just look down and see the stream running under it.
Yeah.
And it's like really kind of dark and in the woods, so you wouldn't get a lot of sunlight, which would be a downside, but it's like completely in the woods. It's like the perfect treehouse woods feel of a location, because like I've always loved that kind of like environment, of really dense forest.
Yeah.
And this treehouse is really cool because you're like at the edge of the forest. You get all this view.
Mm-hmm.
But like that one, you're just in it.
Yeah, it'd feel like more private and secluded.
Yeah.
And like more like you're camping almost.
Right, yeah.
Whereas here you see your house, but you also see the mountain and the...
Right. Yeah, and so yeah, I think it'd be cool to build one that's like a triangle, just because that's kind of the space, and then it would be, instead of being physically attached to, or bolted to the trees, it would just be suspended on cables between the 3 trees, which would make it more durable, like exponentially more long-lasting, because it's such a dense forest that if one of those trees died, you could actually like move the support cable to another tree. It'd be complicated, but less so than building a whole new treehouse. Yeah. And not having a tree going through the center makes it way easier to make it like practical, because it's easier to insulate and keep it waterproof and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I highly doubt I'll ever build it, but if I did build another one, that's
the way you do
what
it.
I do and where I do it. Yeah. Plus,
Nice.
it'd just be cool to have it all suspended and just like floating in space, and creek flowing underneath. It'd be like,
and you've got that cool little like bonfire spot up there now on the zip lines. Like it would be like a cool little hangout spot.
Yeah, and that one you could build a really cool zip line out of the treehouse that just went like straight down the stream bed over the pond.
Oh
just, like, have a porch there and just like
that would be awesome.
All the way down to the creek or something.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
I mean, it would have no purpose, but then again, none of this stuff.
Yeah,
that's
treehouses rarely do.
Yeah. That's like by far the biggest thing that I learned from, or gained from, the experience of building this, is just like it's always worth it to do the things you dream about doing, like the ridiculous things that you like. As an adult, you're like, I have a job, I have bills, I have all these other things, and you always come up with excuses, or very valid reasons usually, to not spend time and money doing like objectively pointless things.
Yeah.
Like super unnecessary. Like my house is not finished, and I spent like 4 days this spring building zip lines because I was like, I want a better zip line. Like all the things that I've learned from all the other zip lines I've had, like I want one that's actually going to be used every day, or not every day, but frequently. Yeah. And so like I spent 4 days doing that, or however long, because like it's just always worth it. It's never like, you never put the time into a project like this and regret it.
Yeah. And I think it's definitely easier to do when you're young, but it's just as important to do when you're older too.
More so.
Yeah.
Like way more so. Like when you're a kid, like that's all you do.
Uh-huh.
And then as a teenager, like you do that kind of sometimes, and then you start getting a job, and then like you get a job you hate, or maybe you don't hate it, but like then you just stop doing exciting and fun stuff. Like you have to do it when you're older to like break out of the mold and keep innovating, and like that's what keeps life exciting, is like always changing, always doing new things.
And is that mentality, and I had a lot of things like that after school too that I went and did that were kind of fruitless in a lot of ways. Like it didn't help my career, it didn't help my
but then it did
financial situation, but it did. Yeah, like if we wouldn't have done those things, we would have never been like, oh yeah, let's just take 6 months and build Barbie cars on YouTube and see what happens. Like, and then we'd be having we'd probably be doing cool stuff, but we wouldn't be having as much fun for work as we are now, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we're both...
Yeah, I think when you do that younger, though, it like builds that mentality. It's like a muscle. Like people talk about like being creative is like a muscle. Like you go to the gym, you work out every day, and you get better at lifting, you lift more, you get technique. And like even if you lose it, you can gain it back easier. But it's like if you're trying to follow through with your ideas, it's like if you have an idea and just do it, even if it takes a year to build a tree house. Like I went to Florida for 2 years to try to be a music producer DJ, and it was like during that time it was like, oh wow, like once you cut the like safety line and like start, then you're like, oh, it doesn't seem that hard. But, like at least for me, like when I was thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I grew up in this little tiny town, like I need to move to like a big city to try to get my music heard, and like it's like, away from all my friends and stuff, and then it's like the second you do it, you're like, oh, it's not that bad.
Just go for it.
You just gotta cut it and start it, and then it just gets like easier. And then
Yeah,
the
for
next
sure.
time you have a crazy idea, you
Yeah.
don't even like question it. Like, I don't
Right.
know. Like, I don't have a crazy idea these days. Like, getting into some of the stuff I've been into recently, even after starting
Yeah,
Grind Hard.
Bitcoin mining and stuff.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh, that looks cool. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I might lose a ton of money. It might be really dumb, but I'll probably get something out of it in the end of the day, you know? Like, yeah, it's like, yeah, stuff like that. Or like learning the drone. Like, that was like
Yeah.
really hard, the FPV drone. And like,
I tried to do that. It's ridiculously hard.
like building it and flying it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, like I don't even question that anymore.
Right.
And I feel like if I would have like gotten to something that difficult when I was like 17, I would have been like, oh, like I don't know, it's like expensive, and what if I don't like it?
Yeah,
and
then
like
you just give up.
you can
at
talk
the
yourself out of
simulator stage.
anything, but you could also talk yourself into anything. And I'd way rather do like a bunch of stupid stuff and regret it than regret not doing something stupid.
Yeah, there's lots of like really, you know, over quoted quotes about that, you know, like
Yeah.
you regret the decisions or the chances you don't take or whatever. You know,
Yeah.
but like it's true.
Uh-huh.
Like that's
Yeah, you see those in school or like presidential plaques at
Yeah.
like national parks. You're like, that's so stupid. And then you like do something like that, and you're like, those guys are right.
yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it.
Yeah.
And we'll have the link to your original Treehouse video down below, and also the video on Grindhard's channel where we showed exactly kind of how the
Yeah.
360 Treehouse works and how this works.
Yep.
And now we'll have all that there. So
Yep.
we think we have a name for the podcast.
Yep.
It was submitted by one of our subscribers.
We put it out to you guys, what we should
Yeah.
call it.
So we're doing the poll this afternoon, but so far our favorite is Sent and Bent.
Sent and bent. It applies.
It applies. And then Plummin' Plumber is also, whoever thought of that was
Genius.
awesome. We'll put your comments up here so people can see your YouTube name, but
Yeah.
those are some great ideas. We just think that the Grindhard Plumbing Company podcast is just like the Grindhard Plumbing Co. is our channel, and this
Yeah.
podcast we want to talk about stuff like beyond the things that we're
Right.
building. Like, I mean, our second episode's about your tree houses. Like, obviously we want to talk to other professionals. Like, there's this guy in town who like designs helicopters, and he's
Yeah.
building like helicopters in like a small town.
Yeah, apparently we haven't like
Yeah.
actually seen it, but that's he
Yeah.
showed us like or sent us a picture
Yeah.
of the prototype. Or whatever,
So we want to do stuff
find
like
out.
that on this podcast,
Yeah.
which that isn't Grindhard Plumbing Co. This is a
Right.
different thing. So
Yeah.
this is probably going to end up being Sent and Bent.
Probably.
So-
yeah. I think Grindhard podcast was tempting just because it's GHPC.
Yeah,
But you know, and it is like separate from Plumbing Co. But you know, I think
Yeah.
Sent and Bent is simpler. Rolls off the tongue better.
Yep.
That's one thing that Grindhard Plumbing Co. does not.
Nope, that's for sure. But by the time you hear this, we should be on like wherever you get podcasts. We'll be on Google Podcasts, Spotify, everything that Apple does. So we think we figured that out. It should all be up tomorrow, which will be today by the time you're listening to this. So yeah, if you would rather listen to us on iTunes, go for it.
Yeah.
We don't really
You don't
care.
need to stare at our stupid faces while we're talking. We're just talking.
Yeah, I know. I listen to podcasts when I'm driving, so that's, you know,
Yeah.
I'll glance over if something's like on the screen, but
Yeah.
for the most part, it's like you're going to try to keep this format in a way where you could watch it and get something out of that and listen to it and get just as much out of it. So
That's the idea.
that's our plan for the show. Do you want to take the bike down or the zip line? I brought the coaster up.
Oh, the trolley. Nice. Well, I'm always down for a zip line.
All right, I'll take the bike then.
Yeah. Sweet.
Sounds good. Here's the bridges we were talking about.
Yep.
And then you got kind of your safety rope there.
Yeah, those didn't exist for the longest time. Like, the whole time I lived up here and I would often use these bridges, no ropes, I just, walked across them. These ropes were actually strung up for the TV show. I had other ropes, but they were they were blue. They didn't like blue ropes. They wanted them to look old, so they went with the crusty old ropes. All right. Well.
So this is the first time you did it on the faster one?
Yeah, so I have multiple zipline trolleys. This is by far the fastest, and I've never done this zipline on it, so it's going to be extra fast. Hit that tree with some velocity.
All right. I like the foot slowdown method.
Yeah, the foot brake works.
That's nice.
I somehow still managed to hit my face on the tree, though.
Ooh. Okay, let's see if I can't cycle down now without dropping anything. It's a little tippy when you first get used to it here. You're gonna gotta push yourself off of the porch, and then you're good. Oh, the brake doesn't work as good as it used to. Here we go.